Hello, everyone. I know that it's 1 o'clock Eastern time. Not sure. I'm sure I think we have a lot of people in a lot of different time zones here. We're going to be starting up at about 1:05 Eastern time. So in about 5 minutes, we're just going to give everybody a couple minutes here to kind of just get into the chat. So we'll be starting again here at 1:05 Eastern. Welcome, everyone. We're just, we're just going to wait a couple extra minutes here just so that everyone can kind of get into this webinar here. And so we'll be starting at about 1:05 p.m. Eastern. So appreciate everyone's patience. Thanks so much, everyone, for taking the time to join. And again, we'll be waiting here for about 3 more minutes or so before we kind of get started. This is always a good time where there's like that elevator music or whatever to kind of play in here. I would offer to sing, but I don't think anybody here wants to hear me sing here. So again, we'll be waiting. We'll be kind of just giving everybody just 1 or 2 more minutes here to just kind of jump in before we kind of get started. Appreciate everyone again, your patience. Really excited to be chatting here with Dr. Mary Funck. And again, we'll be starting here again in about two minutes or so. All right, so let's get kind of started here. Thanks again, everybody, so much for joining us and taking the time here. Today, we have Dr. Mary Funck, who will be talking more about finance in education. And so just to kind of kick things off here, my name is Brandon Eng. I'll be, I guess, the host, I guess, as you will, for today with ExPrep. And so for anyone that isn't aware of what ExPrep is, we are a spreadsheet automation platform. We work with professors like yourselves that have their own Excel assignments, and we basically help you automate all of the grading and feedback. But today we have, again, Dr. Mary Funck. She is the finance department chair at Sam Houston State. She's been working in finance at I think Sam Houston for about 13 or so years at this point. And so, Mary, why don't you give us a little bit more about your background, how you got to where you are, and yeah, why don't we start there?
Well, you better hang on and get ready to take a few twists and turns because I actually started out as a dental assistant and went to nursing until I decided that that was not my path and went back for computer science. I got my bachelor's and master's in computer science and started teaching at the university level until the day I took my first finance class at the MBA level and completely fell in love, saw stars and lights and everything. And so when I completed my MBA and went to Ole Miss to get my PhD in finance. And right from Ole Miss, I came to Sam Houston State University. I've been teaching in the finance department ever since.
Awesome. So I'm a Giants fan. I'm originally from New York, and so I know very well that Eli Manning went to Ole Miss. So, um, and so you were nursing and then pivoted to computer science, and then eventually pivoted to finance. Was there any particular reason where how did you end up coming from all the way from nursing all the way to finance?
Well, I've always been fascinated with nutrition and like physical health. And I think I went into nursing because of that physical aspect, and then really found out that nursing is more about taking care of people as opposed to anatomy and physiology. And I just felt like that maybe wasn't the best fit for me. And I also like the cleanness of a mathematical field because every time you plug two numbers into a formula, you'll always get the same result. But working with humans is just a little bit more unpredictable. So I think it just fit me a little bit better to go into more of a quantifiable field.
Got it. And so you've been in finance for about 13 years. Have you been at Sam Houston for that entire time?
I have. They
Awesome.
can't get rid of me.
So you've been at Sam Houston for 13 plus years. You're now the department chair of finance there. What courses have you taught over at Sam Houston over your time?
So I started with our business finance course, and I taught that for quite a few years, also markets and institutions a few times. But about a decade ago, I recognized that there was no Excel modeling class that was being taught here. Students could take the 100 level course that did Word and Excel and all of the Office applications, but our finance and business students in general weren't getting the Excel skills they needed. So I developed our spreadsheet modeling class, and most of my teaching has been focused on that class for the last decade. I also do some financial statement analysis and some graduate level risk management.
Awesome. And so I know that you've mentioned there that you you've used a lot of Excel. I think your background too in computer science, you've probably dabbled in a bunch of VBA and some of those other types of things. So I guess you use Excel pretty heavily at this point in a lot of your different classes that you've taught.
I think almost all of the classes that I teach now, maybe not quite as much in the foundations course because there's a little bit more conceptual concept that students need to establish. But any other class that I teach actually meets in the computer lab, and lectures are done in Excel, homeworks are done in Excel. So all of my classes are very Excel heavy.
Got it. And so that actually brings us to, if everyone wouldn't mind, take a second. So Dr. Mary Funck, she's going to be sharing some of her stuff soon. Right now, what I'd love to do is just pull out. We just want to hear from the audience real quick. If you guys are using Excel in any of your finance courses or any of the courses that you might be teaching. So there should be a quick little poll. We just want to kind of hear from you if you guys are currently using any of your own, you have your own Excel assignments for your course, if you're using any of other types of assignments, but we just want to hear from you here. So we'll kind of leave this up here for about 15 to 20 more seconds here. And so while people are kind of wrapping up that poll here, Mary, so as you've been in the finance department here at Sam Houston for about 13 years, you've probably seen a lot of changes over the last, a number of years. And so how how has like technology been a role? How has that kind of started to play a role into some of the courses that you're teaching? I know you're using a lot of Excel. It seems like you're using Excel pretty heavily in most of these courses. What other things have you seen as changed over the last decade or so?
I think technology has touched almost every part of how we teach. I think the development of online tools and the propensity for a lot of students to want to learn that way, that has changed what used to primarily be a kind of a face-to-face interaction. I also think that, especially for students in a field like finance, the expectation when they leave the program is that they have some good quantitative skills with some of the most used software packages. So for example, we've created the Excel class, but we're also creating classes to be offered in the fall for the first time. We have a financial analytics and a data visualization course that are going to be offered to our finance students,
Hmm.
and also like Bloomberg technologies, those kind of things. So I think students walking out the door today, if they're not being schooled in the tools that are used in the trade, are at a big disadvantage. And then, of course, the technology with I think touches everything that we do as well.
So tell me a little bit more about that, Mary. So you mentioned AI right there. I know that's been a really hot topic, obviously, over the last year or two, as AI has made some huge strides, where a lot of people are now starting to utilize either ChatGPT or other types of things. Now, I guess my first question, because I know this is a really hot debated topic right now, are you pro or con AI in the classroom? What are your thoughts there?
I'm pro with caution. I think that we need to introduce students to the technology. I just attended a Financial Executives International event a week ago, and almost every industry speaker that got up talked about how AI was changing the job that they did in their companies. And so I think students have to become familiar with it. I don't think we want it to replace their thinking. They still need to have foundational skills and reasoning, logic skills, but I definitely think that we're doing a disservice if we don't give them those skills. And I also think that maybe faculty are putting themselves at a disservice if they're not using those tools themselves. So I think it's on both sides of the classroom that AI can be really valuable.
Do you have any examples that you could share of like how you're incorporating AI into the classroom for your
So
students?
So I've kind of started slow. In my financial statement analysis course, so far this semester, I've had two assignments, and they're both asking the students to go out and prompt. I tell them chat GTP, or if they have another service that they'd like to use. But the first one, I actually gave them the prompts and they inserted a company or an industry name. In the second one, they did the prompts themselves, and they had to consolidate information about changes in financial metrics for a company over its life cycle. And my thought is I want to get them to be able to develop more effective prompts and then to understand how to consolidate that information.
Hmm.
When later in the semester, I would like to have them use AI to do a full analysis of a company, and use that information maybe to create a presentation or a report. And then as soon as my university provides the capability, I'd like to start incorporating Copilot into more of what I do in the classroom. We just don't have it in our labs yet, and even our online version, it doesn't have much capability. So that's for the future.
Got it. Got it. And so AI is one thing that, I know maybe we haven't when we were in school, we didn't really have AI as much, right? And then there's kind of throughout the last 13 years, you've probably seen differences as students have been exposed and grew up with different technologies and things here. So I guess how have you seen changes within students, and how they're learning and how they, all of that? How are you starting to see that from, I guess, 13 years ago all the way to today?
So 13 years ago, students would come into my classroom with these humongous backpacks on and 4 or 5 heavy textbooks right in their in their backpacks. you don't see that anymore. Almost all the text material is going to be digital for them to access. So I think that's an expectation almost on their part. I also think that when we create content, I think maybe social media and some other influences have made them less likely to concentrate for long periods of time. So I think unless you give them smaller bites, then you'll lose your audience a little bit more quickly. And then I think that this is maybe a student body that requires more feedback and faster feedback on the work they're doing, and maybe more assurances that what they're doing is correct. Because I don't always see them kind of taking a little bit more of a like a lead in their education. And so I think technology has done all that, but then technology also gives us some of the tools to help address that.
Yeah, one thing I found with all the students that we end up working with, one of the things that I think I was most surprised about was how students, especially if you're using a Mac, where Macs have made it so simple that students don't know how a file system. So they don't know how to even access like some of their files because of how, for example, Macs have made it so easy and convenient. So, which is interesting because when you're trying to send a file over or upload a file or any of those types of things, that has actually become more of a skill that you need to learn, because a lot of these students haven't been exposed to being able having to do this with their laptops and computers, since everything right now is just so cloud-based.
Absolutely. That's been an issue in my Excel modeling class because I'll provide them with a file. They'll make changes and save it and upload it. And if it's not like in downloads, or sometimes they don't even know to look in downloads, they're kind of lost on how to be able to find where that file is. They don't really structure their work. So I would agree with you that that's been a big change.
Yeah, it's been very fascinating to me to see that kind of shift. And we see a lot in corporate still. In corporate America, there's still the expectation is need to know how to understand a file system and a file structure, right? So that way, if I have to send something to a client or I have to send something internally, I'm choosing the right document to send. And I know how to pull that document to attach it to my email or whatever that might be, so that I can send it over to whoever needs that information. Because in corporate America, not everything is all completely cloud-based. You actually still have to send files, right?
Especially when you have something that is secure or sensitive, you
Right.
might very well not want to have that on a cloud-based platform.
So obviously there's been a lot of shifts in technology, in the way students are learning these days. One thing that we've been really curious for, I guess, the audience here, what are some of the most common mistakes that you guys see students making while you're in the classroom? Because I know we have a lot of professors here, so I think we'll have another poll that kind of pops up here, that just asks you guys, just curious to see what kind of mistakes that you guys are really commonly seeing. And so while I guess while everyone's kind of just polling this second question here, Mary, talk to me a little bit more, because I know that we're talking a little bit more about the finance as a professor. You're also, as a department chair, I believe your responsibilities are split between teaching and also now kind of like the administrative side, right? Understanding. So tell me a little bit more about that role that you have as on the admin side, and the control that you have with how the finance curriculum is going to be positioned for right now and for the future.
So I stepped into being chair, I think, at an amazing time because we have just received a $5 million donation from one of our alumni and board members to develop a trading floor with Bloomberg terminals. And so something like that happens in your department, it almost causes kind of an explosion of change. And so that's led to a lot of development of curriculum, including the analytics and the visualization class and a financial technology class. And then we're also looking to develop a certified financial planning concentration for students to be able to sit for the CFP exam. And along with that, develop maybe a financial literacy center for the university and community that's housed out of our department. So our department had been pretty stagnant, I think, over the years, not a lot of changes. And, they always have that joke about if you don't think the dead will come back to life, you should be here at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when people leave work. My faculty have been re-energized, and they're
Mm.
all working hard without much encouragement, with just on their own for all of these new programs. So I think that we've recognized that we need to better train our finance students, and now that we have some resources and something that's kind of spurring us on for change, I think that we have just a lot going on in our department in a positive way.
Awesome. And so I know as an admin, again, you have some like control over the direction of the finance curriculum and where you guys are kind of taking that. One thing I've heard, we work with a lot of companies, we talk to a lot of companies, and one of the things that I've heard about was a lot of these corporate companies, investment banking companies, private equity firms, they're starting to offer or release out their analyst programs or different types of internship programs earlier to earlier students. So now I remember then when I was in school, typically the standard was your internship would you would have an internship, and most people would have their internship after their junior year of college. And now what I'm finding is that a lot of professors or a lot of these companies are starting to offer these internship opportunities to a lot of students. So for example, I know there's one investment banking firm, they just launched out their summer analyst program for summer of 2026. And one of those expectations is that you need to know financial modeling. And so financial modeling has always generally been a junior or senior level course. So how has Sam Houston State been making changes to the curriculum now that more and more investment banking companies, private equity firms are starting to offer these types of internships at a younger stage in these students' college careers?
So we've actually done a few things. One thing is that we've taken our business finance course, which is that course that all business majors need to take. And it's also kind of the linchpin for the entire finance sequence of courses. We have moved that from our junior year, and we've actually moved it back 2 semesters by changing the prerequisites. So you used to have 2 accounting courses. We call them 2301 and 2302, used to need to have both of those before you could take the business finance. And so we've changed the prerequisite so that only one accounting is needed, which means that they can take this either the first or second semester of their sophomore year, which lines everything else up to be taken sooner. Because if you can get that business finance done, that's going to start you on your path. We've also taken the financial modeling course, and instead of having the business finance as a prerequisite to that, students are now allowed to have that as a co-requisite. So they could be in their business finance and in the modeling course at the same time, which means that that's going to give them at least another semester or two to be able to, get all of those classes in. And besides the internship, we're hoping that this gives students enough time to get all their upper division work done too, because we were running into some of our elective upper division courses weren't making because students just couldn't get all their prereqs done in time. And we're hoping that that addresses that issue as well. Get them in the business school and keep them there.
Yeah, I mean that's and we're seeing that right with companies. They want to get these students earlier. They want to try to secure their top talent at different universities earlier, as it's getting harder and harder to to get top talent, as that's getting spread across a lot of these different firms. And so a lot of them are starting to try to get these students locked in earlier, so that way the likelihood of them continuing to work for that company after they graduate is higher. So that's just interesting, as I've seen that as a lot of things have started to shift. And so kind of coming back to, I guess, more of like professor in the classrooms. So what are you doing? So in finance, with a lot of these financial concepts, financial modeling, I know you mentioned you're using like Excel a bunch now. What are some of the strategies that you're doing to kind of engage students in some of these financial based concepts? What are some of the strategies that you could share with the audience here?
Well, I think one thing I always try to do with my content is I always try to start simple and then kind of build blocks. And I think this is especially true for the student we have in our classroom today. They may not have some of the prerequisite knowledge that we would expect. So definitely starting simple and building blocks. I think I use a lot of repetition. So in my classes, especially my spreadsheet class, if there's a really important skill, I want to make sure and have that student exposed to that skill at least 3 times. So I use what I call like a three-peat rule. I want to see them in lecture, I want it on an activity, and then one other assessment. And for the really big ones like VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP, for example, or if statements, I continue to introduce those even when we are studying something different. So for example, a what if analysis where you might not think of VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP, I still incorporate those skills to keep bringing students back to be able to practice those skills so they don't forget it. And I always think that I like to have Excel make the numbers make sense. So anytime a student, there's something that doesn't make sense for them, if you put numbers behind it, then sometimes they can see a pattern or they can see a result and it helps them understand what's really happening with whatever concept you're looking at.
Right.
I I
Go
also
ahead.
think that, oh, sorry. I was just going to say my mother, who I think was the most brilliant person ever, always taught me that the best way to learn something is to have to teach it to someone else. So if I have
Mm,
any opportunities for peer teaching, I think that's a great way to have someone learn something if they're going to be working with someone else and trying to kind of help lead that person. And
right.
only other thing I was going to say is patience, patience, patience. I think I think I've needed more patience lately than I probably had or used earlier in my career.
That is one thing I will always give you professors and teachers, the patience that you guys have for students is there's so much respect that I have for you guys, because I know I could never probably have that same level of patience that you guys do working with students, as you're trying to teach them. So I give you guys so much kudos for being able to be able to work with these students. And so, one thing I am curious about with the attendees that are in this room, what are you guys doing to help engage and keep your students engaged? And so there should be another poll that should pop up, but we're really curious about what you guys are doing to keep your students engaged. If it's something similar to what Mary's doing here, or if you guys have something else that you guys really focus on, that helps with keeping your students engaged. I think that in the generation that we have today of students going in to these colleges, as you mentioned earlier, Mary, a lot of them have shorter attention spans. They are on their phone a lot. The technology was something they had already when they were born. A lot of differences than maybe some of the previous generations that we've had before. And with all of that comes different learning styles, different learning techniques, and preferences to the way that students are learning today.
I
And so, yeah, I think from the poll here, it seems like a lot of the professors have very similar things that they're seeing as well, and that they're attempting or trying to do within their classroom to just keep students engaged. So I know, we had met when I guess after I think you started using ExPrep for your classroom. I know you were using ExPrep for your financial modeling course, and so I believe we were helping you with just automating some of the grading and your feedback to your financial models. And so tell me a little bit more about what you've kind of been doing, how ExPrep's kind of been helping you with your class. I know that I think you said you had some things you wanted to share too, Mary. So I'm not sure at what point would be best to kind of show some of those types of things as well. Feel free to kind of do that if you'd like as well.
Okay, well, first I just wanted to say I kind of happened upon ExPrep prep almost accidentally. I got an email about the software and quickly deleted it, feeling like it probably could never serve my needs. And then a colleague of mine said he was interested and would I like to join in. And when I had the meeting, it just seemed like, manna from heaven. And I would have to say, using the software has probably, I don't want to be over dramatic, but it has just made such an impact in my satisfaction with my work and my work life the mythical creature work-life balance. So I guess I can thank you for that, but besides the fact that it allowed me to make my workload manageable as I continued to teach more and more sections of this class, because I would sometimes be teaching 3 in a semester, and there's no way you can keep up with that hand grading. I think the other big thing about the software is that it allows you to give immediate feedback to students, and I think they learn better when they know that there's something that they've done is either right or that it's wrong. And so I just think that that's been a bonus for myself and for my students as well. So I just had a couple things. Some of them were ExPrep and some of them were just basic like teaching tips or some things.
Sure.
And so I don't know if I can go ahead and share my screen. If I have that
Yeah, absolutely.
capability, I'll go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I believe you have access, so you're totally welcome to share your screen here.
Okay. So are you seeing some cute little cartoon kids on the screen?
Yep, I think so. I think, is there a way to zoom in a little bit just so I think so that some people can kind of
I don't, can you see a little better?
yeah, I think
What's
so. I maybe I for myself here, my eyes maybe not as good as some of the people in the audience here. Um, but I believe I believe I can see it okay.
Okay, so what's in the little cartoon bubbles isn't really as important as the fact that my big focus here is I have some of these type of things on assessments. So I just wanted to give the idea that assessments aren't just for assessing, they can also be for teaching. So students you might include notes or hints or just additional information that will impact their learning even, and I think sometimes we don't think of an assessment as a learning tool. I also, in Excel, I use some of the ActiveX or form controls to be able to have students answer questions and get immediate feedback. So for example, this is from my time value of money financial math. And do I need to make that a little bigger yet?
Possibly a little bit bigger here, just so that we can all see that. Just
Okay,
so,
how's that? Bigger yet?
I would say like hit it twice, 2 more times if you want to zoom in, like maybe 2 more times here. Yeah, that probably will do it.
Okay. So it just allows me to use Excel to either do some kind of a multiple choice question or fill it like a short answer kind of question. So here, these are just some time value of money questions. And then I have data validation and allows them to select an answer in a drop-down combo box. And then they don't see any of this information to the right, but based on what their response is, it will tell them if they're right or they're wrong. So if I come in here and I select and a correct answer, you can see now it tells me that 3 of them are incorrect. So students can go through this and answer questions, and by the time they move on, they know that they've gotten those questions right. You can also do that with the radio buttons. That's what part 2 is. And then in part 3, again, it's like a short answer. But my students really like this because they know that once they finish, it tells them that it's all correct. And so that just gives them a little bit more confidence of what they've learned. I also will use conditional formatting. This is an example from my financial statement analysis course, and it's in with our cash flow statements, which students generally are not very comfortable with. So what I've done is I put conditional formatting, and I'm just going to go ahead and finish one of where I put the sum function in. And notice as soon as I enter the correct answer, the color changes. So students who are working on this assignment can work through, and then when they have it correct, that gives them the idea that they know that they've done it correctly. And if it doesn't change color, they know that they need to take another stab. It also helps with grading when I can go through and see that everything's the right color, that I don't need to grade these piece by piece. And then the last thing I was just going to mention is this is just a little example from one of my assignments. And a big focus here is having students use the correct type of cell reference. So for example, in this cell, they need to use mixed cell references to allow copying. And so one thing that I like about using a tool like ExPrep is that I can check what the student's done on many levels Like, is the value okay? Or is the reference, or have they called one of several functions? And it allows me to give feedback based on the portion of the task that they've done incorrectly. And it allows me to either be very specific how I want to have something completed, or it allows me flexibility to give them more autonomy. So that was just another a tool that I use a lot. But what I like here is the fact that you can give feedback for each part of the task that they're working on so that they know what they need to correct.
So I know that there was in some of the results, there were some people that were using their own Excel assignments. There were some a mix. There was a handful of people that were using some of the publishers' assignments. Have you used publishers' assignments? Why not? Why not kind of just go that route with working with some of the publishers? They all have some pretty great content. Why not? Why did you decide to kind of create your own stuff as opposed to just going to work with publishers?
So years ago, when I was a computer science instructor, I did use some of the publisher material, and it did allow me to be able to give a lot of assessments that were graded automatically. But sometimes I found that the environments weren't quite the same as Excel, and the grading wasn't quite as flexible as I'd like, as far as specifying how I wanted a task completed. And I also really want to give my students the experience of working in Excel. I don't want it to be a simulated environment. I want them to worry about things like file management, for example. And then I'm kind of particular in what I want to be graded and how. So some of the softwares, they may have a combined task where I don't like the entire task, but I'm not able to modify the task itself to remove maybe a piece that I'm not emphasizing. So this just gives me a little bit more flexibility that I can really make the class what I want.
Got it. So from what I'm hearing here for you, it was more about the control of being able to grade the way that you want to, the way that you wanted to design your content, and the way that things. I think I've heard with other professors have they've kind of mentioned how when they were able to kind of create their own stuff, it allowed them to align their curriculum a little bit better because it just kind of like, hey, this is what I'm teaching, and then what we're doing is kind of really aligned with how I'm teaching it, right? And so I guess that kind of just makes things a little bit more intertwined, a little bit smoother. Is that kind of would that kind of agree with that or?
I would definitely agree with that. And also, I think cost can be an issue because when I created the modeling class, it's all my own material. I mean, I created all the files and the videos and then the assessments. And we have a population that's, 50% first generation, we're Hispanic serving. And so we don't really want to add a lot of extra cost for students if that's something that we can avoid. So I think that also kind of went hand in hand with that.
Got it. Just a kind of just a random question that kind of just popped into my mind, mentioning that you guys at Sam Houston are a little bit more sensitive to some of the costs. Have you kind of dabbled into any of the OER resources? Like OER, I know has kind of been increasing in demand. A lot of schools similar to Sam Houston, I've heard that are more cost sensitive to a lot of different things. Are there any good OER resources that you know of in finance? I know this was kind of like just a random question here, Mary, but I was just curious if you had any ideas on that side.
I really haven't searched for the Excel class because over the decade, I've really developed my own material. I did try to search for a financial statement analysis open resource, and I didn't really find anything that fit my course. I think it's a great idea. The only issue sometimes is you have maybe a less guarantee that those resources might always, like with a publisher, that those sites are always going to be maintained and that you'll have good access to the content. That might be one fear that I have with the open resources. I'm not really familiar with using them very often, though.
Got it. Got it. I think the last question I have is just related. So you mentioned repetition with your exercises, customizing your feedback. How has that impacted students when you've kind of, I know because I mentioned, you had mentioned being able to add customized feedback. through ExPrep, where students, if they get things are incorrect or correct, you're able to say whatever it is that you want to say, right? In terms of the feedback you want to provide to students. How is that? How have you seen that impacting students in the classroom?
Before I used any kind of automated grading, students would turn in an assignment, an activity, and of course it's going to take you at least a day to grade it and return it. But their assumption, I think, was always that it was done correctly. And they never really went back and looked at my feedback, and they never looked at the video that I provided that gave them a correct demonstration, because in their head, they had done it correctly. And once that half a day had passed, I don't think they thought about it again. But with the immediate feedback, I have seen students turn in an assignment 10 times just to earn 2 points. Like they know it's not right and they're willing to put the work in, but I think it just took that realization that it wasn't right the first time. And then they had to delve deeper to figure it out. So I think that's the biggest thing with the feedback, is that they understand that they didn't do it correctly, even though they thought it was, and it gave them just enough information to know what to approach to be able to correct that. I think that's been huge.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm glad that your students seem like they're really engaged and they're enjoying their experience for sure. So I wanted to take this time, I know kind of as we wrap up here, I wanted to take some time to open the floor for other audience members, to any professors here that are in attendance, to ask some questions for Dr. Mary Funck here. What questions, does anybody have any questions for Mary, or anything about anything that we've talked about today? Feel free to just kind of throw in this webinar chat. Feel free to throw in any questions that you guys might have. We'd love to hear from you guys, get some thoughts on anything that we might have talked about or not talked about. Okay, one question I think that came in here. So there's questions about cheating. How is I guess cheating has become more and more of a concern in higher education. And so I guess there's been questions about, how are you, for your class, addressing cheating? How is Sam Houston at the business school addressing cheating? What are some of your thoughts there? What are you doing in your classroom, Mary?
Well, I think at the university level, we have university policies, and we have an honor video that we can embed in each one of our classes. And I do embed that to give the students an idea that academic integrity is important. We also have something in our syllabus that talks about what the ramifications are, or what academic dishonesty looks like. And then if we do have a student who we find has committed academic dishonesty, then we have a procedure to report that person, so we can identify students that maybe are multiple offenders. But also, I think we do have some software tools. Things like the Respondus lockdown in browser is the one that we use, but I'm sure there are other types of systems to help restrict access while students are taking exams. I think we use multiple versions of different assessments, and I know learning management systems have a way to allow for randomization for different types of questions. But I also use it when I'm using like the ExPrep software, because it helps to detect cheating. If a student would turn in a file that was downloaded by another student, that was flagged. And that's actually how I catch most of my cheaters, because in spreadsheets, it's kind of hard to know who's done what work. I also do things like I use VLOOKUP statements to give different versions of the questions to students based on their name. So I'll have like a hidden table, and if you're John, then when you look up the interest rate, it might be 4%. And when Susie looks up her interest rate might be, 8%. So I just try to embed in different ways, having alternate versions of assignments to help break down that as well, whether it's assignments or exams. Any of those, I just try to keep them not the same, so that students are kind of forced to do some of their own work.
Yeah, we've definitely heard multiple versioning, versioning has helped a lot of professors with, especially professors that have larger groups of students. I know there's a number of professors here that teach maybe some of the core classes or larger groups of students. And so I think versioning control, I've heard, has been really helpful. And then, yeah, to your point, we've talked to a lot of professors who, where our platform will kind of mention this person cheated off of this person, and it's really hard, I guess, when you get to a place where you're able to tell that student exactly who they cheated off of. It really changes the conversation, as we know that if you're going to accuse anybody of cheating, then you should probably be 100% sure. And so I guess, that probably helps being able to know or identify who they cheated off of is pretty good proof of knowing if they cheated or not.
And having the times that people submitted and the resulting grades can also help you track like who did the work, right? And then when they turned theirs in and got 100, and then this next student turned it in one time and got 100, you can kind of see patterns as well that I think help substantiate your claims.
Right. And so another question that kind of came into the chat here was, do the students in your class take exams in Excel?
Absolutely. So if they are face to face, they will take it inside within the computer lab that we meet as our classroom, and they'll download an exam file. They'll have tasks that they complete, and they upload it and through Excel, through ExPrep for grading. And then I do go back and kind of check to make sure there were no issues with my key, and that it graded appropriately. For my online students, I give them a couple of options. They can either, I'll give a lab time if they want to come in, especially if they have insecurities about their technology. I'll also hold a couple virtual sessions where they log into the session. And even though I can't see their screen, I can see them taking the exam. So that gives me a little bit of comfort that they're doing the work themselves. And if they don't want to take either one of those first two options, I will have them start a Zoom meeting and record themselves taking the exam. And then they send me a URL to that Zoom meeting, and I can kind of spot check it to see, who took the exam and see if there's any issues with them taking the exam.
Cool. I think, Mary, we're kind of just out of time. We have probably enough time for just one more question. Does anybody have any other questions that they'd like to ask while we still have Dr. Mary Funck here?
They're kind of like my students. They never have questions.
Cool. Well, I think that's probably the last question then. So a couple of just last minute wrap up things. Anyone in the audience here, we definitely love to hear if there's any other types of topics that you guys love to or be interested in. We're always curious about maybe other things. Like we like to hold webinars to just see where we can just have these types of conversations. We'd love to hear about if there's any other topics that you guys are really interested in and would love to hear more about. So if you guys have, feel free to throw it in the chat of some of the ideas that you'd have. We'd love to hear from you there. I think also we also have some free content that we're going to be giving away. So we'll probably send out some follow-up emails to everybody in the audience. You guys are totally welcome to access some of the content. One of the pieces of content that we're actually going to set you guys up with, one of our partners is Training the Street, and we're going to give you guys one of their free pieces of content that they have. So we're going to be sending that too. If you guys would like that, feel free to ask for that when we reach out to you guys. But otherwise, Mary, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It was really awesome to get to know a little bit more about yourself, to hear more about what you guys are doing at Sam Houston State to help prepare your students for a lot of their future careers. And so if anybody else has any other follow-up questions for Mary, feel free to either reach out to us and we can connect. We're happy to connect you guys with Mary, or just send her an email. I know that, again, she's a finance professor over at Sam Houston, but I know that a lot of professors like to collaborate and chat with each other. And so you guys are totally welcome to reach out if you need. But again, Mary, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate, and we hope everybody here has a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, everyone.